LGB. 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 LGB.
They say LGB everywhere I go. LGB. What it means, I don't know. LGB. Whatever it is. LGB. Kamala, help me, please. Please.
Alrighty then.
Thank you. LGB.
That's let's go, Brandon, right?
LGB.
This means let's go, Brandon.
Go. LGB.
Sounds like let's go, Brandon, I guess.
LGB. All right. Let's go, Brandon.
I am Cornholio.
Chant LGB. Right wing and left wing. LGB. Go, you know the thing. LGB. If you don't sing that back. LGB. And you ain't black. LGB.
Let's go, Brandon.
LGB.
Let's go, Brandon.
LGB.
Let's go, Brandon.
FJB. Let's go, Brandon.
I'm Joe Biden, and I
Forgot
this message.
Greetings, my dear friends, and welcome to another episode of Reading Epic Threads. I'm your host, Patrick Gunnels, joining you from Houston, Texas, this February 24th at 3:03 p.m. Central Standard Time. I am indeed live. I am very pleased to say that I am talking to you at the exact same time that you're talking back to me in the chat. So if you do me a favor and smash that thumbs up to encourage this behavior on my part, that would be fantastic. There is one chatter in the chat, and that is Ariel J7 saying, my hubby loves books and history. I told him about your channel. It's like finding a gold mine, a good storyteller who reads the most epic threads for free. Score. Well, I mean, it is sort of for free, but I also constantly try to sell you stuff. So, you know, it works out really well because those of you who really want to, I guess, support what I do here, you can go to epicthreads.tv. Let's take a look at epicthreads.tv in a minute. But first, I want to introduce you to another website called rcmogo.com, Christian fiction. Ah, there we are. rcmogo. Well, that actually stands for Rebecca C. Mogoljon. And that is my sister's married name. Her maiden name is Gunnels. And she is my baby sister, and she wrote a novel. So what do you say we take a look at the promo video for that? That's right. My baby sister wrote a novel. Took her a long time to write it too. I haven't read it yet myself. I'm not sure I'm the voice to read it as the epic thread reader, but if she asks me, I will certainly do it. And if she does not ask me, I completely understand. Just like, you know, on Badlands, they use other people for voiceovers. My voice can be an acquired taste. It's a little stilted for some, a little overdramatic for others. I saw one criticism in the chat at one point say, could he just kind of read it more normal? I don't do normal. Just to let y'all know, the reason I talk the way that I talk, and I don't mean this as an insult, but I have a very discerning ear for accents. Now, I'm not saying I can imitate them perfectly, but there are a great many dialects of English that sound very much like speech impediments to me. And it's more than you realize to me. Just regular accents. And what does that mean? That means that I try to avoid sounding speech impedimenty. I'll give you another example. I try to speak in such a way that if you slowed me down, you would still not detect any slurring of the words. Try slowing somebody down to 75% or 50%. It makes them sound drunk. I try not to sound drunk even when slowed down. As a result, I tend to sound, I don't know, shall we say, stuck up? And just to let y'all know, I am extremely stuck up. All right. So I have an announcement that I'm going to make at the end of this show. And it's going to be awesome. But the main event for this episode of Reading Epic Threads is the brilliant Jason All, who, well, let's face it, he's an original contributor to Reading Epic Threads. He has been with me since the beginning. I mean, since way before Badlands, and he produces wonderful content. I don't have any idea what the topic is. The piece is entitled IBOR. I don't know what that means. I think it probably has something to do with a valuation method, maybe, but I don't need to know. You know why? Because we're going to find out together. All right. This is a good, solid, long piece. You ready, guys? Strap in. IBOR. I remember March 2018 vividly. I had found the posts around the end of December 2017, the Q drops, and spent the next couple months catching up on all the missed posts up until that point. By March, I felt as if I was fully up to speed. I hadn't yet been humbled by the training and was waiting with bated breath for the next post to drop. Then we got Q drop number 872 of March 7th, 2018, hashtag Internet Bill of Rights. Q, followed just 50 minutes later by Q drop number 873 at Snowden. We are going live, -24. Comb your hair. IBOR. This scares them more than anything. Loss of control. Use logic. Nothing to do with AT&T. Must be regulated to prevent censorship and narrative push. Q. Later that day, and then the following day, we got 3 more posts with references to IBOR, drops 877, 884, and 885, all of which appeared to be just more references to the Internet Bill of Rights. Just a few days beforehand, an Anon had asked in Q drop number 841, has Q ever mentioned Internet Bill of Rights? To which Q responded, reread drops. And then the link, about.att.com/story/consumers need an Internet Bill of Rights.html. Q. Which led us back to Q drop number 605 of January 25th, 2018. Thank you, F&F. Coincidence? AT&T, greater than sign, no such agency. Contract. AT&T, greater than sign, Goog, FB, etc. Prevent unfair censorship. Push. Internet Bill of Rights. Q. So, it all seemed pretty well tied up in a nice bow. IBOR, Internet Bill of Rights, was just shorthand for Internet Bill of Rights, or was it? Remember this extract from Q drop number 1114 of April 9th, 2018. Keep in mind that every crumb is not meant to be solved before the event. Some of the drops are things for anons to dig on and make connections with. Others are markers for future reference. Future proofs past. Some drops are just simply communication to the anons. What needs to be understood to appreciate what's going on here is the fact that Q is basically creating a circular flow diagram that can be referenced and cross-checked with news releases. Q can't just disclose specifics about a situation or operation without violating security protocol. Instead, they drop questions and statements that lead to answers that can be understood once the subject becomes public. This provides the validation necessary for the public to believe the Great Awakening is legit. Disinformation and misdirection with Q is real. In other words, Q is pointing over there, but really the focus is here, and only until you publicly get the news can you go back and understand. Think SA drops. All of this is accomplished without giving up specific details about the operation. It's quite genius. So, let's go back to Q drop number 873 with a more critical eye and consider the following questions if we assume that IBOR was simply a reference to the Internet Bill of Rights. 1. Why was the post addressed to Snowden? 2. Would the Internet Bill of Rights really be something that would, quote, scare them more than anything? 3. Was the fact that it had, quote, nothing to do with AT&T a hint that it was not simply closing the loop with Q drop number 605? Since multiple posts state that double meanings exist, let's see if we can find an alternative meaning for IBOR. IBOR. 10 things you need to know about the IBOR transition from EY.com. The upcoming phase out of the interbank lending rate means big changes to financial services, IBOR. But few firms are prepared. For more than 40 years, interbank offered rates, IBORs, especially the London interbank offered rate, LIBOR, have been a fact of daily life for the global financial services industry. They've set the benchmark rate for lending on an unsecured basis, underpinning the worldwide trade in financial products, from bonds and loans to derivatives and mortgage-backed securities. But this familiar world is now being upended. A series of scandals has sealed the fate of the once dominant IBOR benchmark. In 2012, a group of banks were accused of manipulating their IBOR submissions during the financial crisis. In the wake of those scandals, the UK Financial Conduct Authority, FCA, shifted supervision of the index to the Intercontinental Exchange Benchmark Administration, IBA. Despite steps taken by the IBA to strengthen the benchmark, the ongoing slowdown in unsecured debt market activity has diluted IBOR's relevance. 3-month US dollar LIBOR, the most heavily referenced IBOR benchmark, is supported by less than $1 billion in transactions per day. Both the UK and US plan to phase out IBOR and move to a new benchmark known as alternate reference rates, ARR, by the end of 2021. Many other countries are planning to do the same. The transition from IBORs to ARRs will impact the global financial system in two critical ways. First, there's the challenge of legacy contracts. While firms are pivoting away from IBORs, trillions of dollars of debt and derivative products will continue to reference the index after the 2021 deadline. And second, ARRs and IBORs are distinctly different. No ARR will be equivalent to the related IBOR because of structural differences between the two. IBOR underpins unsecured and uncollateralized debt and continues to rely on a good deal of expert judgment. ARRs are based on actual overnight transactions and secured by collateral. This variation between IBORs and ARRs means that the risk profile and valuation of trillions of dollars of financial contracts will likely change once they're benchmarked by ARRs. To mitigate the uncertainty, firms will need to determine the appropriate spreads to be applied to ARRs ahead of the transition, requiring the recalibration of a wide range of financial and risk models. This transition will demand a significant transformational effort from both financial services firms and market participants with extensive exposure, bringing a number of challenges along the way. While it's not a prerequisite to this IBOR discussion, hopefully you watched Chris and Burning Bright discuss The Big Short this past Tuesday on Badlands Story Hour. Here's a link in case you missed it, or if you just want a refresher. There it is. I'll put the link in the description if I remember to. But for this discussion, let's just focus on the following clip from the movie. All right, 445. 0 to 445 at 1.5x.
It's only a matter of time before someone else sees this investment. We have to act now.
How do you know the bonds are worthless? Aren't they filled with fucking thousands of
Pages of mortgages?
I read them.
You read them?
Yes.
No one reads them. Only the lawyers who put them together read them.
I don't think they even know what they've made. The housing market is propped up on these bad loans. It's a time bomb, and I want to short it.
Through what instrument, Michael? There are no insurance contract or options for mortgage bonds. The bonds are too stable.
Lawrence, this is what I'm going to do. I am going to get a bank to make me one. And then I'm going to buy it.
Never sit down. Where's the pen? I already got to break down. It's letting the fun tank.
Hands Dr. Berry's office. No, he actually prefers that you email. Excuse me. Lawrence, we have no confidence in your ability to identify macroeconomic trends. You flew here to tell me that? Why? Anyone can see that there's a real estate bubble.
Actually, no one can see a bubble. That's what makes it a bubble.
That's dumb, Lawrence. It's always markers. Mortgage fraud has quadrupled since 2000, and the average take-home pay is flat, but home prices are soaring. That means the homes are debt, not assets.
So Mike Burry of San Jose, a guy who gets his hair cut at Supercuts and doesn't wear shoes, knows more than Alan Greenspan and Hank Paulson.
Yeah, Dr. Mike Burry, yes, he does.
That's cute. That's cute. Are you being sarcastic with us, Mike?
Lawrence, I don't know how to be sarcastic. I don't know how to be funny. I don't know how to work people. I just know how to read numbers.
How big's your short position right now?
Just 1.3 billion.
And the premiums?
We pay roughly 80 to 90 million each year, which is high, but I was the first to do this trade. Watch it, we'll pay. I may have been early, but I'm not wrong.
It's the same thing. It's the same thing, Mike.
You're managing a fund of, what, 555 million? In 6 years, it'll all be gone. On one bet.
No, the second quarter of 07 is when the adjustable rates kick in and the defaults will skyrocket.
Yeah, says you.
How much is eligible for withdrawal before they do, say in the next 2 quarters? If your investors panic.
302 million.
My God, Mike.
No one will pull out. That would be suicide. I mean, I'm down 17% for the year, but if they trust me, and they trust me.
No one trusts you.
I
No
sent
one.
several emails to my investors letting them know that the second quarter of 07 is when our housing positions show returns, and I've been very clear.
People will withdraw their money.
Lawrence, that would be so stupid. I mean, if the fund's capitals drop too much, then the swaps contracts are voided, and then the banks get to keep all of the collateral.
Wait a minute.
All of it.
What? The contracts are voided? The contracts are voided? Holy shit. Oh, motherfucker.
Michael, give me my money back. Michael, do you hear me? I want my money back. Give me my fucking money back. You motherfucker.
Sorry. There we go. Assuming you saw the movie, you know that Dr. Burry's analysis was correct, but did you notice how close he came to losing it all? What's the old saying? The market can remain irrational longer than you can remain solvent. That's a great, great rule to live by. Dr. Burry was able to hold on long enough by restricting withdrawals. Fortunately for him, he was dealing with the Wall Street casino, so he had plenty of time before the lawsuits could stop him. If, on the other hand, he had been dealing with the Vegas casino, then he might not have had as much time. Notice that nobody likes bankers.
It's just a political witch hunt. Want something to drink? Charlie, you want a refill?
Yeah.
Refill be great.
No, I don't know. Hey, Mr. Clark, how you doing? I'm trying to reach you. It's tougher to get than the president.
Well, I've been busy.
Yeah, at least you could do is return my phone calls, though.
Listen, Nicky, we talked about this, and I explained to you that there was the possibility you might have to take some kind of loss.
Yeah. I think I want my money back.
What are you going to do, strong arm me?
You know, I think that you got the wrong impression about me. I think in all fairness, I should explain to you exactly what it is that I do. For instance, tomorrow morning, I'll get up nice and early, take a walk down over to the bank and walk in and see you. And if you don't have my money for me, I'll crack your fucking head wide open in front of everybody in the bank. And just about the time that I'm coming out of jail, hopefully, you'll be coming out of your coma. And guess what? I'll split your fucking head open again. Because I'm fucking stupid. I don't give a fuck about jail. That's my business. That's what I do. And we know what you do, don't we, Charlie? You fuck people out of money and get away with it. Hey, you fat Irish prick, you put my fucking money to sleep. You go get my money or I'll put your fucking brain to sleep. Sam. Never mind, fucking Sam, this is personal. I'll be there in the morning. You can fucking try me, fatso. You fucking try me. Think you got the point?
What are you doing? He's a square guy, for Christ's sake.
I love that scene. There are countless examples of others who were not as fortunate as Dr. Burry. From earlyretirementnow.com, the options seller's debacle, how to blow up your portfolio in 5 easy steps. Right around the time when I wrote my options selling update a few weeks ago was when everyone in the option seller circles talked about the blow up of optionsellers.com. Options Sellers LLC was a Tampa, Florida-based registered investment advisor and CTA, commodity trading advisor. They managed money for 290 clients. Considering the minimum investment was $250,000 and most investors likely had more money with them, I'd surmise that they were managing around $150 million. On November 15th, 2018, they informed their investors that not only was all their money lost, but that clients would likely owe more money. Wow, let that sink in. They had a loss of more than 100%, and clients are left with debts they have to cover now. Bad news for the clients who invested all their money with option sellers. A failure of a small, obscure advisor probably would have stayed under the radar, but the co-founder published a tearful apology video confessing that all customer accounts were wiped out, quote, by a rogue wave. The movie was since taken down. Probably the lawyers didn't like the idea of this kind of mea culpa so much, but it's still available on YouTube. The story went viral, or at least as viral as something as obscure as options trading can go, and was then picked up even by the national news media, including the Wall Street Journal, CNBC, and many others. Quite intriguingly, their strategy imploded over a span of just a few trading days. And just to be sure, this wasn't a fraud a la Bernie Madoff, but investors actually lost their money fair and square, if there is such a thing. Or we could use the movie Margin Call as another example. Are you ready for when the music stops?
And Mr. Sullivan, what does your model say that that means for us here?
Well, that's where it becomes a projection. But,
You're speaking with me, Mr. Sullivan.
well, sir, if those assets decrease by just 25% and remain on our books, that loss would be greater than the current market capitalization of this entire company.
So, what you're telling me is that music is about to stop, and we're going to be left holding the biggest bag of odorous excrement ever assembled in the history of capitalism.
Sir, I'm not sure that I would put it that way, but let me clarify. Using your analogy, what this model shows is the music, so to speak, just slowing. If the music were to stop, as you put it, then this model wouldn't be even close to that scenario. It would be considerably worse.
Let me tell you something, Mr. Sullivan. Do you care to know why I'm in this chair with you all? I mean, why I earn the big bucks?
Yes.
I'm here for one reason and one reason alone. I'm here to guess what the music might do a week, a month, a year from now. That's it. Nothing more. I'm standing here tonight. I'm afraid that I don't hear a thing. Just silence.
Now, let's get back to the LIBOR scandal. From theguardian.com, LIBOR scandal, the bankers who fixed the world's most important number. At the Tokyo headquarters of the Swiss bank UBS, in the middle of a deserted trading floor, Tom Hayes sat rapt before a bank of 8 computer screens, collar askew, pale, features pinched, blonde hair mussed from a habit of pulling at it when he was deep in thought. The British trader was even more disheveled than usual. It was 15 September 2008, and it looked, in Hayes's mind, like the end of the world. Hayes had been woken up at dawn in his apartment by a call from his boss telling him to get to the office immediately. In New York, Lehman Brothers was hurtling towards bankruptcy. At his desk, Hayes watched the world processing the news and panicking. As each market opened, it became a sea of flashing red as investors frantically dumped their holdings. In moments like this, Hayes entered an almost unconscious state, rapidly processing the tide of information before him and calculating the best escape route. Hayes was a phenomenon at UBS, one of the best the bank had at trading derivatives. So far, the mounting financial crisis had actually been good for him. The chaos had let him buy cheaply from those desperate to get out and sell high to the unlucky few who still needed to trade. While most dealers closed up shop in fear, Hayes, with a seemingly limitless appetite for risk, stayed in. He was 28, and he was up more than $70 million for the year. Now that was under threat. Not only did Hayes have to extract himself from every deal he had done with Lehman, he had also made a series of enormous bets that in the coming days, interest rates would remain stable. The collapse of Lehman Brothers, the 4th largest investment bank in the U.S., would surely cause those rates, which were really just barometers of risk, to spike. As Hayes examined his trading book, one rate mattered more than any other: the London Interbank Offered Rate, or LIBOR, a benchmark that influences $350 trillion of securities and loans around the world. For traders such as Hayes, this number was the holy grail. And 2 years earlier, he had discovered a way to rig it. LIBOR was set by a self-selected, self-policing committee of the world's largest banks. The rate measured how much it cost them to borrow from each other. Every morning, each bank submitted an estimate, an average was taken, and a number was published at midday. The process was repeated in different currencies and for various amounts of time, ranging from overnight to a year. During his time as a junior trader in London, Hayes had got to know several of the 16 individuals responsible for making their bank's daily submission for the Japanese yen. His flash of insight was realizing that these men mostly relied on interdealer brokers, the fast-talking middlemen involved in every trade, for guidance on what to submit each day. Brokers are the middlemen in the world of finance, facilitating deals between traders at different banks in everything from treasury bonds to over-the-counter derivatives. If a trader wants to buy or sell, he could theoretically ring all the banks to get a price, or he could go through a broker who is in touch with everyone and can find a counterparty in seconds. Hardly a dollar changes hands in the cash and derivatives markets without a broker matching the deal and taking his cut. In the opaque, over-the-counter derivatives market, where there is no centralized exchange, brokers are at the epicenter of information flow. That puts them in a powerful position. Only they can get a picture of what all the banks are doing. While brokers had no official role in setting LIBOR, the rate setters at the banks relied on them for information on where cash was trading. Most traders looked down on brokers as second-class citizens, too. Hayes recognized their worth. He saw what no one else did because he was different. His intimacy with numbers, his cold embrace of risk, and his unusual habits were more than professional tics. Hayes would not be diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome until 2015 when he was 35, but his co-workers, many of them savvy operators from fancy schools, often reminded Hayes that he wasn't like them. They called him Rain Man. By the time the market opened in London, Lehman's demise was official. Hayes instant messaged one of his trusted brokers in the city to tell him what direction he wanted LIBOR to move. Typically, he skipped any pleasantries. Cash, mate. Really need it lower, Hayes typed. What's the score? The broker sent his assurances and, over the next few hours, followed a well-worn routine. Whenever one of the LIBOR-setting banks called and asked his opinion on what the benchmark would do, the broker said, incredibly, given the calamitous news, that the rate was likely to fall. LIBOR may have featured in hundreds of trillions of dollars of loans and derivatives, but this was how it was set. Conversations among men who were, depending on the day, indifferent, optimistic, or frightened. When Hayes checked the official figures later that night, he saw to his relief that yen LIBOR had fallen. Hayes was not out of danger yet. Over the next 3 days, he barely left the office, surviving on 3 hours of sleep a night. As the market convulsed, his profit and loss jumped around from minus $20 million to plus $8 million in just hours, but Hayes had another ace up his sleeve. ICAP, the world's biggest interdeal broker, sent out a LIBOR prediction email each day at around 7 a.m. to the individuals at the banks responsible for submitting LIBOR. Hayes messaged an insider at ICAP and instructed him to skew the predictions lower amid the chaos. LIBOR was the one thing Hayes believed he had some control over. He cranked his network to the max, offering his brokers extra payments for their cooperation and calling in favors at banks around the world. By Thursday, 18 September, Hayes was exhausted. This was the moment he had been working towards all week. If LIBOR jumped today, all his puppeteering would have been for nothing. LIBOR moves in increments called basis points, equal to 1/100th of a percentage point, and every tick was worth roughly $750,000 to his bottom line. For the umpteenth time since Lehman faltered, Hayes reached out to his brokers in London. I need you to keep it as low as possible, all right? He told one of them in a message. I'll pay you, $50,000, $100,000, whatever you want, all right? All right, the broker repeated. I'm a man of my word, Hayes said. I know you are. No, that's done. Right, leave it to me, the broker said. Hayes was still in the Tokyo office at 8 p.m. when that day's LIBORs were published. The yen rate had fallen 1 basis point, while comparable money markets rates in other currencies continued to soar. Hayes's crisis had been averted. Using his network of brokers, he had personally sought to tilt part of the planet's financial infrastructure. He pulled off his headset and headed home to bed. He had only recently upgraded from the superhero duvet he'd slept under since he was 8 years old. Hayes's job was to make his employer as much money as possible by buying and selling derivatives. How exactly he did that, the special concoction of strategies, skills, and tricks that make up a trader's DNA, was largely left up to him. First and foremost, he was a market maker, providing liquidity to his clients, who were mostly traders at other banks. From the minute he logged on to his Bloomberg terminal each morning and the red light next to his name turned green, Hayes was on the phone, quoting guaranteed bid and offer prices on the vast inventory of products he traded. Hayes prided himself on always being open for business no matter how choppy the markets. It was his calling card. Hayes likened his part of his job to owning a fruit and vegetable stall. Buy low, sell high, and pocket the difference. But rather than apples and pears, he dealt in complex financial securities worth hundreds of millions of dollars. His profit came from the spread between how much he paid for a security and how much he sold it for. In volatile times, the spread widened, reflecting the increased risk that the market might move against him before he had the chance to trade out of his position. All of this offered a steady stream of income, but it wasn't where the big money came from. The thing that really set Hayes apart was his ability to spot price anomalies and exploit them, a technique known as relative value trading. It appealed to his lifelong passion for seeking out patterns. During quiet spells, he spent his time scouring data, hunting for unseen opportunities. If he thought that the price of two similar securities had diverged unduly, he would buy one and short the other, betting that the spread between the two would shrink. Everywhere he worked, Hayes set up his software to tell him exactly how much he stood to gain or lose from every fraction of a move in LIBOR in each currency. One of Hayes's favorite trades involved betting that the gap between LIBOR in different durations would widen or narrow, what's known in the industry as a basis trade. Each time Hayes made a trade, he would have to decide whether to lay off some of his risk by hedging his position using, for example, other derivatives. Hayes's dealing created a constantly changing trade book stretching years into the future, which was mapped out on a vast Excel spreadsheet. He liked to think of it as a living organism with thousands of interconnected moving parts. In a corner of one of his screens was a number he looked at more than any other: his rolling profit and loss. Ask any decent trader, and he will be able to give it to you to the nearest $1,000. It was Hayes's self-worth boiled down to a single, indisputable number. By the summer of 2007, the mortgage crisis in the U.S. caused banks and investment funds around the world to become skittish about lending to each other without collateral. Firms that relied on the so-called money markets to fund their businesses were paralyzed by the ballooning cost of short-term credit. On 14 September, customers of Northern Rock queued for hours to withdraw their savings after the bank announced it was relying on loans from the Bank of England to stay afloat. After that, banks were only prepared to make unsecured loans to each other for a few days at a time, and interest rates on longer-term loans rocketed. LIBOR, as a barometer of stress in the system, reacted accordingly. In August 2007, the spread between 3-month dollar LIBOR and the overnight indexed swap, a measure of banks' overnight borrowing costs, jumped from 12 basis points to 73 basis points. By December, it had soared to 106. A similar pattern could be seen in sterling, euros, and most of the 12 other currencies published on the website of the British Bankers Association each day at noon. Everyone could see that LIBOR rates had shot up, but questions began to be asked about whether they had climbed enough to reflect the severity of the credit squeeze. By August 2007, there was almost no trading in cash for durations of longer than a month. In some of the smaller currencies, there were no lenders for any time frame. Yet, with trillions of dollars tied to LIBOR, the banks had to keep the trains running. The individuals responsible for submitting LIBOR rates each day had no choice but to put their thumb and forefinger in the air and pluck out numbers. It was clear that their best guesses were unrealistically optimistic. A game of brinkmanship had developed in which rate setters tried to predict what their rivals would submit and then come in slightly lower. If they guessed wrong and input rates higher than their peers, they would receive angry phone calls from their managers telling them to get back into the pack. On trading floors around the world, frantic conversations took place between traders and their brokers about expectations for LIBOR. Nobody knew where LIBOR should be, and nobody wanted to be an outlier. Even where bankers tried to be honest, there was no way of knowing if their estimates were accurate because there was no underlying interbank borrowing on which to compare them. The machine had broken down. Vince McGonigal, a small and wiry man with a hangdog expression, had been at the Enforcement Division of the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, CFTC, in Washington for 11 years, during which time his red hair had turned gray around the edges. A practicing Catholic, McGonigal got his law degree from Pepperdine University, a Christian school in Malibu, California, where students are prepared for lives of purpose, service, and leadership. While his classmates took highly paid positions defending companies and individuals accused of corporate corruption, McGonigal opted to build a career bringing cases against them. He joined the agency as a trial attorney and was now, at 44, a manager overseeing teams of lawyers and investigators. McGonigal closed the door to his office and settled down to read the daily news. It was 16 April 2008. And the headline on page 1 of the Wall Street Journal read, "Bankers cast doubt on key rate amid crisis." It began, quote, "One of the most important barometers of the world's financial health could be sending false signals in a development that has implications for borrowers everywhere, from Russian oil producers to homeowners in Detroit. Bankers and traders are expressing concerns that the London interbank offered rate, known as LIBOR, is becoming unreliable." End quote. The story, written at the Journal's London office near Fleet Street, went on to suggest that some of the world's largest banks might have been providing deliberately low estimates of their borrowing costs to avoid tipping off the market that they're desperate for cash. That was having the effect of distorting LIBOR and therefore trillions of dollars of securities around the world. The journalist's sources told him that banks were paying much more for cash than they were letting on. They feared if they were honest, they could go the same way as Bear Stearns, the 85-year-old New York securities firm that had collapsed the previous month. The big flaw in LIBOR was that it relied on banks to tell the truth, but encouraged them to lie. When the 150 variants of the benchmark were released each day, the bank's individual submissions were also published, giving the world a snapshot of their relative creditworthiness. Historically, the individuals responsible for making their firm's LIBOR submissions were able to base their estimates on a vibrant interbank money market in which banks borrowed cash from each other to fund their day-to-day operations. They were prevented from deviating too far from the truth because their fellow market participants knew what rates they were really being charged. Over the previous few months, that had changed. Banks had stopped lending to each other for periods of longer than a few days, preferring to stockpile their cash. After Bear Stearns, there was no guarantee they would get it back. With so much at stake, lenders had become fixated on what their rivals were inputting. Any outlier at the higher, that is, riskier end, was in danger of becoming a pariah, unable to access the liquidity it needed to fund its balance sheet. Soon, banks began to submit rates they thought would place them in the middle of the pack rather than what they truly believed they could borrow unsecured cash for. The motivation for lowballing was not tied to profit. Many banks actually stood to lose out from lower LIBORs. This was about survival. Ironically, just as LIBOR's accuracy faltered, its importance rocketed. As the financial crisis deepened, central bankers monitored LIBOR in different currencies to see how successful their latest policy announcements were in calming markets. Governments looked at individuals' firms' submissions for clues as to who they might be forced to bail out next. If banks were lying about LIBOR, it was not just affecting interest rates and derivatives payments, it was skewing reality. There was no inkling at this stage that traders such as Hayes were pushing LIBOR around to boost their profits, but there was a benchmark that relied on the honesty of traders who had a direct interest in where it was set. LIBOR was overseen by the British Bankers Association, BBA. In both cases, the body responsible for overseeing the rate had no punitive powers, so there was little to discourage firms from cheating. When McGonigal finished reading the Wall Street Journal article, he emailed colleagues and asked them what they knew about LIBOR. His team put together a dossier, including some preliminary reports from within the financial community. In March, economists at the Bank for International Settlements, an umbrella group for central banks around the world, had published a paper that identified unusual patterns in LIBOR during the crisis, although it concluded these were, quote, not caused by shortcomings in the design of the fixing mechanism, end quote. A month later, Scott Peng, an analyst at Citigroup in New York, sent his customers a research note that estimated the dollar LIBOR submissions of the 18 firms that set the rate were 20 to 30 basis points lower than they should have been because of a, quote, prevailing fear among the banks of being perceived as a weak hand in this fragile market environment, end quote. While there was no evidence of manipulation by specific firms, McGonigal was coming around to the idea of launching an investigation. In 2009, Hayes was lured away from UBS to join Citigroup. The head of Citigroup's team in Asia, the former Lehman banker Chris Cesare, a small, goateed American with a big reputation for finding new ways to make money, had been given millions of dollars to attract the best talent, and Hayes was his round one pick. It wasn't just the $3 million signing bonus that had won Hayes over. The promise of a fresh start at one of the world's biggest banks with him at center stage in its aggressive expansion into the Asian interest rate derivatives market had proved too tempting to resist. After persuading him to join, Cesare boasted to colleagues that he'd found a real fucking animal who, quote, knows everybody on the street. Cesare set in motion plans for Citigroup to join the IBOR, Tokyo Interbank Offered Rate panel, which Hayes would crow was even easier to influence than LIBOR because fewer banks contributed to it. Hayes wanted to hit the ground running when he started trading, and being able to influence the two benchmarks that helped determine the profitability of the bulk of his positions was an important step. Another was bringing Citigroup's own London-based LIBOR setters on board. On the afternoon of 8 December, Cesare was at his desk on the Tokyo trading floor. He had an office but seldom used it, preferring to be amid the action. He believed that 6-month yen LIBOR was too high. After checking the submissions from the previous day, he was surprised to see that Citigroup had input one of the highest figures. Cesare contacted the head of the risk treasury team in Tokyo, Stanley Tan, and asked him to find out who the yen setter was and request that he lower his input by several basis points. It turned out the risk treasury desk in Canary Wharf was responsible for the bank's LIBOR submissions. I spoke to our point man in London, Tan wrote back to Cesare that afternoon. I've asked him to consider moving quotes lower. Cesare checked the LIBORs again later that night and was annoyed to see that Citigroup had only reduced its 6-month rate by 1/4 of a basis point. He wrote to Tan, "Can you speak with him again?" The following day, Tan went back to the Treasury desk in London as requested. He also forwarded the message chain to Andrew Thursfield, Citigroup's head of risk treasury in London. The response he got back from his UK counterpart left little room for misinterpretation. It was a thinly veiled warning to back off. Hayes, who sat just behind his boss, was not on the email chain, but Cesare sent it to him. Thursfield was a straight-laced man in his 40s who had spent more than 20 years in risk management at Citigroup after joining as a graduate trainee. He saw himself as the guardian of the firm's balance sheet and didn't take kindly to being told how to do his job by a pushy trader who knew nothing of the intricacies of bank funding. Rather than lowering the inputs, Thursfield's team increased its submission days later, pushing the published LIBOR rates higher. Hayes would have to try a different tack. On 14 December, he sent an email to his London counterpart asking him to approach the rate setters directly. Quote, "Do you talk to the cash desk, and did we know in advance?" Hayes asked, referring to the bank's decision to bump up its LIBOR submissions. "We need good dialogue with the cash desk. They can be invaluable to us. If we know ahead of time, we can position and scalp the market." End quote. What Hayes didn't realize was that no amount of schmoozing was going to get the rate setters on side. Unlike some banks, Citigroup was taking the CFTC's investigation into LIBOR seriously. In March 2009, Thursfield had personally delivered an 18-page presentation via video link to investigators on the rate-setting process. The cash traders weren't about to risk their necks for someone they didn't know who worked on the other side of the world. It wasn't just that they knew they were being watched. Thursfield was not only a stickler for the rules, but had taken a personal dislike to Hayes when the pair had met 3 months earlier. It was October 2009, shortly after Hayes had accepted the job at Citigroup and his boss had sent him to London to meet the bank's key players. "Good to meet you. You can help us out with LIBORs. I'll let you know my axes," Hayes said, by way of an opening gambit when he was introduced to Thursfield. Unshaven and disheveled, Hayes told the Citigroup manager how the cash desk at UBS frequently skewed its submissions to suit his book. He boasted of his close relationships with rate setters at other banks and how they would do favors for each other. Hayes was trying to charm Thursfield, but he had badly misjudged the man and the situation. The following day, Thursfield called his manager, Steve Compton, and relayed his concerns. Quote, "Once you stray onto talking about LIBOR fixings, I mean, we just paid another $75,000 bill to the lawyer this week for the work they're doing on the CFTC investigation," Thursfield said. "Whoever is the desk head or whatever should have a close watch on just what he's actually doing and how publicly. It's all, very much Barrow Boy type behavior." End quote. The knock on Hayes's door came at 7 a.m. on a Tuesday, 2 weeks before Christmas 2012, Hayes padded down the bespoke pine staircase of his newly renovated home in Waldingham, Surrey, to let in more than a dozen police officers and serious fraud office investigators. A year before, he had been fired from Citigroup and shortly afterwards returned to the UK, where he married his girlfriend, Sarah Tahi. Hayes stood at his wife's side as the officers swept through the property, gathering computers and documents into boxes and loading them into vehicles parked at the end of the gravel driveway. The couple had only moved in a fortnight before. Their infant son was upstairs in bed. Traffic was heavy by the time the former trader was led to the back of a waiting car. The 20-mile crawl from Surrey to the City of London passed in silence. Bishopsgate Police Station is a grey concrete building on one of the financial district's busiest thoroughfares. In a formal interview, Hayes was told he had been brought in to answer questions relating to allegations that between 2006 and 2009, he had conspired to manipulate yen LIBOR with two of his colleagues. Hayes responded that he planned to help, but would need time to consider the 112 pages of evidence, so would not be answering any questions that day. It was late when he arrived back in Surrey. In June, Barclays had become the first bank to reach a settlement with authorities, admitting to rigging the rate and agreeing to pay a then record £290 million in fines. From the moment Barclays had settled, sparking a political firestorm that burned for weeks, Hayes's destiny had been leading to this point. The Serious Fraud Office, SFO, which had previously resisted launching a probe into LIBOR rigging, was forced to reverse its position, and on 6 July issued a statement announcing it would be undertaking a criminal investigation. That week, the government launched its own review into the scandal. The British public and its politicians were out for scalps. On 19 December, 8 days after his arrest, Hayes was at home on his computer when a news bulletin popped up with a link to a press conference in Washington. As cameras flashed, Attorney General Eric Holder and Lanny Brewer, head of the Justice Department's criminal division, took turns outlining the $1.5 billion settlement the authorities had reached with UBS over LIBOR. The Swiss bank, they explained, had pleaded guilty to wire fraud at its Japanese arm. Then came the sucker punch. Quote, in addition to UBS Japan's agreement to plead guilty, two former UBS traders have been charged in a criminal complaint unsealed today with conspiracy to manipulate LIBOR, said Brewer. Tom Hayes has also been charged with wire fraud and an antitrust violation, end quote. Neither Tan nor Cesare has ever been charged with wrongdoing. At that moment, the full horror of the situation hit Hayes for the first time. The two most powerful lawyers in the U.S. planned to extradite him on 3 separate criminal charges, each carrying a 20 to 30-year sentence. Less than 24 hours later, a member of Hayes's legal team was on the phone to the SFO, Serious Fraud Office, to discuss cutting a deal. Fighting the charges seemed futile. The UBS settlement made reference to more than 2,000 attempts by Hayes and his colleagues to influence the rate over a 4-year period. He was the star attraction, the Jesse James of LIBOR, as he would later tell it. The U.S. authorities had yet to issue extradition papers, but it was only a matter of time. So began a race to convince the Serious Fraud Office to take on Hayes as a sort of chief informant who, in return, would receive leniency and, more importantly, an agreement that he would be dealt with in the UK. To secure this arrangement, Hayes had to agree to tell the SFO everything he knew and promise to testify against everybody involved. Crucially, he also had to plead guilty to dishonestly rigging LIBOR. It was not enough to admit trying to influence the rate. He had to confess that he knew it was wrong. During 2 days of so-called scoping interviews to test his knowledge of the case, Hayes talked openly about his campaign to rig LIBOR for the first time in his life. At the SFO's offices near Trafalgar Square, he admitted he had acted dishonestly and brought the investigators' attention to aspects of the case they knew nothing about. The interviews covered everything from his entry into the industry and his trading strategies to how the LIBOR scheme began and the various individuals who helped him rig the rate. They barely had to prod to get him to talk. Hayes seemed to relish reliving moments from his past. His voice sped up when he talked about heady days, piling into positions, squeezing the best prices from brokers, and playing traders off against each other. Quote, "The first thing you think is, where's the edge? Where can I make a bit more money? How can I push the boundaries? Maybe you know a bit of a gray area, push the edge of the envelope," he said in one early interview. "But the point is, you are greedy. You want every little bit of money that you could possibly get because, like I say, that is how you are judged. That is your performance metric," end quote. Paper coffee cups piled up as Hayes went over the minutiae of the case. At one stage, Hayes was asked about how he viewed his attempts to move LIBOR around. The exchange would prove crucial. "Well, look, I mean, it's a dishonest scheme, isn't it?" Hayes said. "And I was part of the dishonest scheme. So obviously, I was being dishonest."
Shit, this is really gonna affect people.
Yeah, it's going to affect people like me.
Real people.
Jesus, Seth. Listen, if you really want to do this with your life, you have to believe you're necessary, and you are. People want to live like this in their cars and their big fucking houses they can't even pay for. Then you're necessary. The only reason that they all get to continue living like kings is because we got our fingers on the scales in their favor. I take my hand off when then the whole world gets really fucking fair, really fucking quickly, and nobody actually wants that. They say they do, but they don't. They want what we have to give them, but they also want to, play innocent and pretend they have no idea where it came from. Well, that's more hypocrisy than I'm willing to swallow, so fuck normal people. The funny thing is, tomorrow, if all of this goes tits up, they're going to crucify us for being too reckless. But if we're wrong and everything gets back on track, well, then the same people are going to laugh till they piss their pants because we're going to look like the biggest pussies God ever let through the door.
You think we're gonna be wrong?
Nah, they're all fucked.
How about a current update on IBOR? From Bloomberg, North America IBOR transition endgame. Or is it? This year, North American countries will reach another milestone in the financial markets transition from unsecured rates to risk-free rates, RFRs. The United States transitioned away from LIBOR on June 30th, 2023, while Canada is finalizing the second stage of the transition from the Canadian dollar offered rate, CDOR, to the Canadian overnight repo rate average, CORA. In addition, Mexico is approaching an important milestone in the move from the Tasa de Interés Interbancaria de Equilibrio, or Interbank Equilibrium Interest Rate, TIIE, to the new TIIE de Fondeo. In order to explain the implications of this year's transition milestones, it's helpful first to understand the key shortcomings driving the IBOR's cessation. Following the global financial crisis, GFC, and the LIBOR manipulation scandal, credit-based interbank rates came into the spotlight. RFRs were seen as the answer to the industry's calls for a more robust interest rate benchmark as an alternative to LIBOR. As a result, the next decade was focused on reforms aimed at strengthening the robustness of IBOR benchmarks and the creation of a new risk-free rate following the guidance of the Financial Stability Board, FSB, the Alternative Reference Rates Committee, ARRC, the International Organization of Securities Commission, IOSCO, principles, among many others. While LIBOR, CDOR, and TIIE are all unsecured, forward-looking term rates which incorporate a bank's credit and term risk, e.g. 1, 3, 6 month, there are key distinctions in what they measure and reflect. LIBOR and TIIE are banking borrowing rates, that is, the rate at which banks believe they can borrow from other financial institutions. Meanwhile, CDOR is a committed lending rate that reflects the rate at which banks are contractually willing to provide credit via a primary banker's acceptance loan facility. A key shared issue is that they were and are all survey-based rates based on judgment and not on specific transactions. Although interbank rates served the global markets well for decades, the limitations gave rise to the creation of SOFR and the TIIE de Fondeo, as well as the strengthening of the decades-old CORA benchmark to be compliant with IOSCO principles. These new RFR attempts to address the IBOR's shortcomings via several key features. First, they eliminate bank credit risk and serve as a near risk-free rate because they are collateralized by their respective government debt. These include U.S. Treasury securities for SOFR, Government of Canada bills and bonds for CORA, CETES, and Mexican bonds for the TIIE de Fondeo. Additionally, they mitigate any misrepresentation risk by the panel of experts because they are calculated and determined based on transaction data from the repurchased agreement repo market. Finally, as overnight rates, SOFR, CORA, and TIIE de Fondeo do not contain term risk premium. In sum, the new benchmark rates reflect the cost of overnight cash collateralized by liquid debt securities issued by their respective governments. However, these new rates come with their own set of challenges. For instance, since daily RFR are backward-looking in nature, their final payment is determined at the end of the compounding period. This creates a challenge for corporations that require certainty on their upcoming interest, cash receipt, or payment. This led to the development of different forward-looking term RFRs, such as the 1, 3, 6, 12-month CME term SOFR and the 1, 3-month term CORA. As of this writing, there are some restrictions on loan products and in the execution of derivatives referencing term RFRs. Currently, end-user clients, such as corporations, can obtain loans and trade derivatives for hedging cash products referencing these forward-looking rates. However, liquidity providers are restricted to hedge this risk directly in the interbank market. Where are we now in the North America IBOR transition? In June 2023, the Canadian market reached an important milestone with the completion of the first stage of the CDOR to CORA transition plan. One key element covered during the first stage was the transition of liquidity away from CDOR to overnight CORA for new derivatives. After this stage, new derivatives tied to CDOR cannot be traded unless it can be proved that this new CDOR swap reduces existing CDOR risk. In 2024, Canada is on track to complete the second stage of its transition plan with the cessation of the publication of CDOR by the end of June. End users and financial market participants should see progress in the development of the forward-looking 1- and 3-month term CORA benchmarks based on the futures market, as well as the trigger of CDOR fallbacks for any remaining CDOR-based exposure. In other words, because there will not be a synthetic CDOR publication, existing CDOR-based loans need to be amended to reference either term CORA plus credit spread adjustment or the standard daily compounded overnight CORA plus credit spread adjustment. In Mexico, the TIIE transition has been bumpy, as key cessation dates are likely prone to be extended. Regardless of the latest January 2025 waiver extension period for the 28-day TIIE cessation, there will likely be some progress on the fallback conversion of legacy TIIE swaps to the synthetic 28-day TIIE equivalent, daily compounded TIIE de Fondeo, to term plus 24 basis points. In addition, this year should mark the start of the liquidity transition on the derivatives market towards the new TIIE de Fondeo benchmark. Additionally, 2024 will see the end of the less liquid TIIE benchmarks, 91 and 182 days, as no new agreements can be referenced to those rates. Now, I don't claim to fully understand all of this, and I certainly can't even predict the next moves, let alone timing, but it feels to me as if there's something here. And I want to be careful that I don't fall into a date fagging trap, but I'll give you just a couple of the reasons why I'm anticipating some March madness this year. 1. On the current trajectory, the reverse repos will be exhausted sometime in March. 2. The Bank Term Funding Program, BTFP, is scheduled to end on March 11th. Remember last spring when we covered the banks, Credit Suisse, SVB, etc., in multiple compilations? The Fed slapped a Band-Aid on that gaping wound at the time. From federalreserve.gov, Federal Reserve Board announces it will make available additional funding to eligible depository institutions to help assure banks have the ability to meet the needs of all their depositors. To support American businesses and households, the Federal Reserve Board on Sunday announced it will make available additional funding to eligible depository institutions to help assure banks have the ability to meet the needs of all their depositors. This action will bolster the capacity of the banking system to safeguard deposits and ensure the ongoing provision of money and credit to the economy. The Federal Reserve is prepared to address any liquidity pressures that may arise. The additional funding will be made available through the creation of a new Bank Term Funding Program, BTFP, offering loans of up to 1 year in length to banks, savings associations, credit unions, and other eligible depository institutions pledging U.S. Treasuries, agency debt, and mortgage-backed securities and other qualifying assets as collateral. These assets will be valued at par. The BTFP will be an additional source of liquidity against high-quality securities, eliminating an institution's need to quickly sell those securities in times of stress. With approval of the Treasury Secretary, the Department of the Treasury will make available up to $25 billion from the Exchange Stabilization Fund as a backstop for the BTFP. The Federal Reserve does not anticipate that it will be necessary to draw on these backstop funds. After receiving a recommendation from the boards of the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, FDIC, and the Federal Reserve, Treasury Secretary Yellen, after consultation with the President, approved actions to enable the FDIC to complete its resolutions of Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank in a manner that fully protects all depositors, both insured and uninsured. These actions will reduce stress across the financial system, support financial stability, and minimize any impact on businesses, households, taxpayers, and the broader economy. The board is carefully monitoring developments in financial markets. The capital and liquidity positions of the U.S. banking system are strong, and the U.S. financial system is resilient. Depository institutions may obtain liquidity against a wide range of collateral through the discount window, which remains open and available. In addition, the discount window will apply the same margins used for the securities eligible for the BTFP, further increasing lendable value at the window. The board is closely monitoring conditions across the financial system and is prepared to use its full range of tools to support households and businesses, and will take additional steps as appropriate. It was set up to be a temporary fix for 1 year, but no one really believed it would end as scheduled until the Fed made a surprise announcement in January. From federalreserve.gov, Federal Reserve Board announces the Bank Term Funding Program, BTFP, will cease making new loans as scheduled on March 11th. The Federal Reserve Board on Wednesday announced that the Bank Term Funding Program, BTFP, will cease making new loans as scheduled on March 11th. The program will continue to make loans until that time and is available as an additional source of liquidity for eligible institutions. During a period of stress last spring, the Bank Term Funding Program helped assure the stability of the banking system and provide support for the economy. After March 11th, banks and other depository institutions will continue to have ready access to the discount window to meet liquidity needs. As the program ends, the interest rate applicable to new BTFP loans has been adjusted such that the rate on new loans extended from now through program expiration will be no lower than the interest rate on reserve balances in effect on the day the loan is made. This rate adjustment assures that the BTFP continues to support the goals of the program in the current interest rate environment. This change is effective immediately. All other terms of the program are unchanged. Steve Eisman, who was played by Steve Carell in The Big Short, touched on an important aspect in this interview. They mistook leverage for genius.
Is you have an entire generation of Wall Street executives who grew up in the 90s and the early aughts who really only had one experience, which is they made more money every single year. Now, what they didn't really notice was as they were making more money every single year, the leverage of their various institutions was increasing every single year. Now, they thought they were making more money because it was them, but really what was happening is they were making more money because their institution was becoming more levered. And really what happened was they mistook leverage for genius. I wrote that sentence, by the way.
You wrote that sentence,
I
by
did.
the way.
It's a good sentence.
It's a good sentence.
I don't write a lot of good sentences, but that's definitely one of them.
That's tweetable.
Yes, it's very good. Very. If I tweeted, I would tweet it.
You would tweet that, yeah.
So let's imagine you went to a Wall Street executive in circa 2006, and you said to the CEO of, pick the name of your institution, and you'd say, dude, listen, the entire paradigm of your career is wrong. You have to delever.
So did you ever have a conversation like that?
I did. I've never told this story before. This is like a now it can be told story.
Okay.
So the date is February 2008, and I have a meeting with the head of risk management at one of the big Wall Street firms. We won't name the name of the company.
Name them.
But it wouldn't matter because I would have had it would have been the same conversation with any of them, given what the discussion was. So I sit down with the head of risk management of one of the big firms. It's 1 month before Bear Stearns, almost to the day.
Okay.
And I say to him, you have got to delever, and you've got to delever now because Armageddon is coming.
Did you use the word Armageddon?
It's almost a direct quote, and I use the word Armageddon.
Okay.
And he looks at me and he says, I hear what you're saying, but we at X, we can be much more levered than a bank. Now, back then, there was a bank based in Detroit called Nat City. It was a medium-sized regional bank, and it had a lot of subprime mortgages, so it was a bit of the topic of the day. And so I said to him, do you know what happens if Nat City goes down? And he says, no, what happens? I said, nothing. So the regulators come in, they seize the bank, they pay off the depositors, they fix the bank, they sell the bank, the government takes something of a loss, end of story. Do you know what happens if your firm goes down? Planet Earth burns. Who should be more levered? And he looked at me like I was speaking ancient Greek.
Right.
Like it was so outside his paradigm. It's like he didn't know what he was talking about. And I realized it was over, that there was no way these guys were going to do what needed to be done before the world blew up.
Please indulge me for a moment as we walk through a quick thought exercise. Imagine you have determined that the whole banking system is corrupted beyond repair, but you know that those in control of the system are willing to see the world burn before they would give up their control. Hypothetically, if you could find a weakness through commercial real estate, who would you want on your side?
This may be the only thing I do that matters.
People need dramatic examples to shake them out of apathy, and I can't do that as Bruce Wayne.
Sometimes a person will have to actually lead a different life.
Who are you?
Someone like you. Someone who'll rattle the cages.
Because nobody else can.
It's like putting on a mask.
Yes. Mr. Trump.
Yes,
Are you Batman?
I am Batman.
Q drop number 720 of February 11th, 2018. Do people believe all recent resignations, plane crashes, plane reroutes, EMS, EBS activations, blackouts, etc. are simply a coincidence? Why did Sessions, at the beginning, emphasize investigations/proceedings are kept confidential. Think magic. What you see, ... Do you really believe nothing is being done? Reread past crumbs. Who has the power? Why was this emphasized in the beginning? You have more than you know. Q. To be continued. It gave me chills at the end, guys. That was badass. Thank you so much to the brilliant Jason All. Now, I have a bit of an announcement. EpicThreads.tv is the home of Angel Paste. And I'm going to be making the big announcement on the Devolution Power Hour tonight. But you guys, my wonderful favorite humans in the whole wide world, obviously, I want to announce this to you first. So I want to go to EpicThreads.tv immediately. And we're going to check it out together. Sharing it. And then I'm going to read you the script that I wrote for this. The new Angel Paste is Angel Paste Sweet Orange. It is right now available for pre-order. So let me tell you about this. So this is what I'm going to be saying on the Devolution Power Hour tonight, except not the Badlands promo code. Attention, all proud patriots of the USA. Are you ready to elevate your skincare routine to new heights of natural luxury? Introducing our premium sweet orange infused Angel Paste, meticulously crafted with only the finest food-grade plant oils for your indulgence. Picture this. The vibrant scent of ripe oranges invigorating your senses with every application, while nutrient-rich oils deeply nourish and hydrate your skin. But what sets this version of Angel Paste apart is our secret weapon, Sweet Orange Essential Oil, loaded with vitamin C, a powerful detoxifier known to revitalize and brighten your skin. Made with love and dedication in Spring, Texas, this lotion embodies the essence of American quality and purity. It's not just about the luxurious experience. It's about embracing the spirit of wellness and natural living. With each pump, you're not just treating your skin, you're making a statement of allegiance to the land of the free and the home of the brave. Angel Paste embodies the values of freedom, purity, and excellence that define the American spirit. Join the ranks of those who demand the best for their skin and their country. Elevate your skincare routine with our Sweet Orange Essential Oil Infused Angel Paste, where natural ingredients meet American pride. Because in America, we believe in nothing less than the best. Go to epicthreads.tv and click on the Angel Paste collection and make sure to use promo code Shapiro to pry $1 from my grasping hands. Your skin will drink it up. All right, so go to epicthreads.tv. Check out the Angel Paste Sweet Orange Infused, available for pre-order. We are going to be shipping on March 8th. I expect to sell out before we even ship. So I'm giving you guys the first crack at this, of course. When you go to cosmetics in general, stuff that you put on your skin with high content of vitamin C, those things are expensive as hell. So get the Sweet Orange Angel Paste instead. And a quick caveat on that, don't go sunbathing while you've got vitamin C all over your skin. Do it indoors, or don't spend a long time in the sun when you're putting on vitamin C infused stuff. Sweet Orange, our newest offering at Angel Paste. Your skin will drink it up. All right, guys, thank you so much for being here. Thank you again to the extremely brilliant Jason All. And I love it when he comes up with a new submission. It's absolutely outstanding. Look forward to his next one. And of course, Jason All is exclusive to Reading Epic Threads. So you can find it here and share this video with your friends. Smash that thumbs up button if you can. Really helps us when you do that. Let's pray. Saint Michael the Archangel, defend us in battle. Be our protection against the wickedness and snares of the devil. May God rebuke him, we humbly pray. And do thou, O Prince of the heavenly host, by the power of God, cast into hell Satan and all evil spirits who prowl about the world, seeking the ruin of souls. Amen. I love you all. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you tomorrow.
I will be the greatest president that God ever created.